So, you want to be a real estate investor, but where do you start? How do you know what information and sources to trust? That's where I come in. I'm Jonny Cattani, and this is the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. Hey guys, real quick, before we start, go to investwithcattani.com and download my free ebook, Is Commercial Real Estate Recession Proof? Now to today's show. Welcome to another episode of the IRR Real Estate Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. My guest today is Lou O'Connor. Lou is the Managing Director of Strategic Metals Invest, a new asset class, same paradigm as precious metals. Instead of, or in addition to owning gold or silver, the investor physically owns strategic metals, which are the raw materials that power our daily lives and are critical to the transition to a low carbon economy, electric cars, solar photovoltaics, wind power, and modern technology. Interesting fact, rare earths have outperformed gold, the FTSE100 and the S&P 500 for the last 5 years. He is also a member of Raise Masters, which you'll hear me bring up a lot. And his adventures so far have taken him to many interesting places, growing up in Ireland, living in Germany for 10 years, Latin America for 20 years, and has recently returned back to Ireland. So we're very excited to have you, Lou. Welcome. And, let's jump right into it. As I was saying offline, this is very enticing space and sounds like fairly new in terms of private investors, at least, as you mentioned, outside of Europe and specifically Germany. So kind of talk to me about what led you to this space.
Okay, well, I swear, where does one begin? I suppose what led me to it really was, I suppose, an interest in alternative assets or alternative investments. You know, the way sometimes we tend to think, and I, used to think that, the way you feel you missed the boat on stuff, like the dot-com boom or you hear something, even like a lot of people with Bitcoin heard about it 2010 and they sort of went, no, that'll never take off. And then all of a sudden, so what I learned from my mistakes, I suppose, is that we still live in the age of great discoveries, and we still live in the age of where, something new will come along and surprise us, and, purely from an investment perspective. So I try not to have that what do you call it, sort of contempt before investigation. Sometimes, especially when I go, that doesn't sound too good or something, that's when I really need to pay a bit more attention, because so that's what it was. I was in Panama, Central America, and it was actually a client from the US who was investing in agriculture in Panama. He told me about this rare earth metals company he'd heard about in Germany, and he was going to go over and do his due diligence. And so my ears sort of pricked up right away. And what I did is I went to Germany. I invested, actually. I became an investor at the beginning in 2017. And then I became a commercial partner, sales partner in 2020.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it looks like your history is pretty involved in sales.
Yeah.
What kind of led you to that, from a young age and all growing up? Just natural born salesman, or?
No, they say there are natural born salespeople, but I think they're the ones that are full of BS. My first actually sales job was working for a US company in Europe. And it was on the US military bases, Ramstein Air Base, actually, which is still there. And I suppose I was taught about selling from a US perspective. And the US has always been very innovative with new technologies, and even sales at one point was a new technology, right before computers came along. And so even this was in like the middle or the late 80s. Even then, Europe would have been way behind the US and that sort of thing. And this company provided great training, and they sort of taught me that there was sort of a science to selling, but they didn't teach teaches to be, like some people, are more adaptable to it and they might have the personality. But what I learned over time really is like good salespeople are it's not the gift of the gab. It's more 70% is their attitude towards, what they do and what they bring to it. And, being professional is, is very, very important. But I might be going back in time. Things have sort of improved all around anyway. But back then, it was sort of different. But I think we're all salespeople. Everybody, if they have a product or a service, they're in sales, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly one thing, I've learned. And, I have some sales background as well. And, that's kind of led me over to the capital raising side of real estate and various investments. And just like you said, I mean, we're all salesmen in some form or another, right? Even, so far as like dating, right? You're basically selling yourself. So,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
it's always a good skill to have and,
Yeah.
very, very useful. So, I want to circle back. I mean, this is obviously a very interesting alternative investment, and you kind of explain what led you to it. So, talk to me now about what exactly you're doing for the company and
Okay.
where you're at
Okay.
now.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah. So look, as you mentioned earlier, the product itself is the investor owns a tangible asset, and what they buy is they buy rare earth metals, which I'm going to call strategic metals from here on in, and they're critical to, like, they're in all modern technology, and they're going to play a huge role, or they already play a huge role in this sort of transformation we're about to go through over the next decade to a low carbon economy. So electric vehicles, solar panels, wind power is where the demand is, what's really driving up the demand. Now, most people don't know. I mean, my mantra, which I say to a lot of people, is the only obstacle to investors profiting from owning rare earths. It's not that they don't go up in value, because they do. It's not that you can't do it safely and securely, because you can. It's just they don't know about it. As I mentioned to you briefly earlier, this opportunity has been available in Europe for the last 12 years. My partner is a German metals trader. So primarily their business is they buy metals from producers, mostly in China, because China is the dominant market leader in rare earths. And then they resell them back to industry like Siemens, BMW, Apple Computers, US Department of Defense. These would all be their clients. Now, they've been doing that side of the business for 30 years, but the storing them as assets has only sort of started in the last 12 years. And what they did is they bought what was an air raid bunker, an air raid shelter in Frankfurt, and converted it to a bank level secure vault. It's a Zollager, which means it's a duty free, but it's just like storing in Switzerland. It's all tax free, So for the last 12 years, they've been offering this opportunity to Germans, Austrians, Swiss, mostly German speakers. So they haven't really done any marketing in English, but I came on board 2 years ago because they now have more storage capacity and they've opened it up a bit more to international partners. And I'm offering it to Ireland, UK, and North America.
Okay.
But the actual sort of transaction, if you will, is the investor buys the metals, they store them in the vault in Frankfurt, watch them go up in value. And I don't know if we'll get time today, but anybody interested, I can email them, the prices and returns and stuff. They're very good. As you said, they've outperformed gold for the last 5 years. And the other important factor is the German company Tradium in Frankfurt as well provide the exit, because there's no point in me or you, Jonathan, having $100,000 worth of gallium or praseodymium, which go into smartphones in a safe or a locker out the back, because how are we going to liquidate them? The only end buyer for this product are industry buyers. So, there's no point in doing this unless you have somebody like Tradium who will guarantee, one, the authenticity and the purity levels and the analysis reports, and two, the liquidation.
Okay. That's very interesting. Makes a lot of sense. Kind of like basically like a broker, almost essentially, like you mentioned. So I want to touch on one point you said. You said that China is the dominant producer, or what makes them so dominant in that field? It looks like they own about 80% of it.
Good question. Yeah, excellent question. Um, so in 1987, the premier of the Chinese Communist Party at the time, Deng Xiaoping, from a mine, he was standing on a rare earths mine, and you can Google this. You'll see this is fact. In 1987, he said, "The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths." That was a very shrewd prediction. China in the late 80s could see, and we're probably thinking 30 years ahead, and they could see how much these rare earths would be needed in technology. I mean, technology hadn't really kicked off yet, but I guess they saw it coming. At that time, when he said that, Jonathan, China had 37% of production and the US had about the same. The US and China were on a par. Since then, though, China has ran away with it. China now accounts, they have more than, first of all, they have at least 50% of the world's reserves just in their natural resources. But they have more than 80, they monopolize the production, supply, and also critically the refining. They have, for example, there's one mine in America, in California, that produces rare earths, but they still send these raw materials to China to be refined. So it's not a bit complicated, but I explain to you how it works is these rare earths, they're not all that rare, even though they're called rare earths. That's what they were, when they were discovered 150 years ago, they were considered rare. So they can be found anywhere, even, in the US, in Europe, in China, but it's rare to find them in abundance. And when you do, they'll also be a byproduct of another metal. So they have to be sort of melted down and separated. And the Chinese have gotten about a generation ahead of the rest of the world. It's funny we're talking this week, right? Because it was announced yesterday that President Biden was going to announce today that the US Department of Defense was going to begin to stockpile rare earths to begin to try and wean their dependence off China. So you're going to start to hear about a lot of this in the news, what we're talking about now. And it was going to be announced today, but then Putin went and started a war. So that sort of took over, But you will, if you do a little bit of digging, or anybody listening, if you do a little bit of digging and investigating, you're going to find that this is sort of hidden in plain sight. And, the US and the EU are sort of looking at themselves going, how did we get here? Like, how does China, have a near monopoly on this market? Now, just to give you an idea, like 2 of our metals doubled in value last year alone. Why is that? It's because China produced double the amount of electric cars they did before. So the thing to remember, I'm not saying China's good or bad or anything like that. This is sort of an apolitical situation. This is just purely from an investor's perspective we're talking. China's priority is themselves. So if they need to restrict export quotas because they need neodymium for car batteries, then they're going to take care of their own interests first. And that's sort of what's happening. So you've got China sort of with the dominant market share, and then you have massive demand sort of increasing all over the world for these metals, and you have the supply chain can be limited and subject to disruption by China. So I hope that sort of answers your question.
No, absolutely. That's a really great answer, and gives a lot of insight into why China is so dominant. So I'm very curious kind of about the mining. So I want to touch a little bit more on that. What is it that you look for? Are you taking core samples just like any other kind of mining, or what is it that you're looking for that can kind of point you to potentially a big stash of these elements?
Okay. Look, good question, but that's not my area of expertise. So I sort of forgot to sort of mention a little bit earlier, which is Tradium in Frankfurt. They only buy from sort of reputable, bona fide producers in China, and they don't buy any conflict metals. So for example, just to give you one idea, just one of their clients is Siemens. Now, Siemens is the largest industrial manufacturer in Europe. It's a 150-year-old company. It's a conglomerate. They have assets of over 47 billion euro. Every single month, Siemens place an order with Tradium for rare earths, for machinery and all of these things. And they've been doing that for 20 years. So what Tradium need or have is metals that have analysis reports, purity levels, case numbers, authenticated metals, if you will. So our business starts with authentic metals already, being through that authentication process, already sort of bona fide and stamped they're already in the supply chain, if you will. So that other side of the business, like maybe investing in mines, I wouldn't know anything about.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. So then that, makes it even a little bit more, I guess, safer for the investor.
Correct.
Knowing that it's already coming through. There's no conflict involved with the metal getting there. So, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's kind of dig in then here. What are kind of some of the use cases for the elements? You mentioned things like cell phones, different things like that. Talk to me about some of the things that these elements are used for in technology.
Okay, good question. So look, when I first invested, Jonathan, I thought, okay, these metals are a good store of wealth. They're a good hedge against inflation. I didn't expect or foresee huge returns. I mean, healthy returns, but not huge. However, what's sort of driving things now are two things. One is these metals are critical. Like, you couldn't swipe your phone without gallium or indium. There's 12 rare earth elements in one smartphone. They're in the screens that we're using right now. So all modern technology. Now, you look at sort of like Brazil, Russia, India, China, they're depositing hundreds of millions of people into the middle class. Anyone, people who sort of, more wealth they have, they want the new stuff, they want the modern stuff. So in the developed world and in the sort of developing world, there's just this massive demand for technology. I mean, we know what I mean. I have two daughters here, and they're already, I mean, I'm sure the manufacturers do it that way. Is they have a new model out every 2 years, and everybody wants the new model and stuff. So all modern technology, and we know that's not going to end, right? But the other big driving factor is, and I can't say exactly how or why this happened, but for some reason, I think since COVID, the world has made its mind up that we are now going to go to a low carbon economy. And it doesn't matter to me whether you believe in climate change or not. That's not the point. This is again, the pure, looking at it purely as an investor. But the reality is, the fact is, we are going to transform how we power our daily lives. You could say the climate crisis is an energy crisis, because 80% of global emissions come from how we power our daily lives. We're about to completely transform that. It's a monumental thing we're about to do over the next decade. And rare earths are the raw materials for electric cars, for solar power, for wind power. Just to give you an idea, like these technologies that are coming, for example, when I say solar power, people think maybe you have solar on the window of a roof of a house or something. But because of indium, what's going to, in another 2 to 3 years, indium will be in your phone here, and on the front of it. And that, because of its capacity to store and transfer electricity, your phone won't need to be plugged into charge because of rare earths. The windows on your house will have thin film solar cells, again with indium. So the windows will absorb electricity and transfer it and power the house. The roof of your car will do the same. So that's why there's such a great investment right now. And for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, and I'll just finish with one thing, which is, we offer 9 metals, and 5 of them are listed as critical by the US and the EU for national and economic security. So the US and the EU has sort of woken up to, we need to wean ourselves off China. How are we going to do that? Well, it's going to take at least as long as China took to get where they are. We didn't get here overnight, and we won't exit overnight. So for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, they're a fantastic investment. After that, I don't know. But one thing's for sure, like if they do start to refine in America and Europe and Australia, they will probably do it. It'll be more costly because they'll do it more sustainably than China. So either way, that's good news for investors, you know. Now I'll just give you a quick number. Last year, if you bought rare earths at the beginning of last year and sold them at the beginning of this year, you would have made a 64.7% profit. So on average, they're up 60% last year. And it's been like that, Jonathan, for the last 5 years, 50, 60, 70% a year. This year, we're only 7 weeks in, they're already up 10%. So this is a real thing. It's not a contrived sales pitch. If somebody, you know, does a little bit of investigation, I mean, they'll see China is the dominant market leader. They'll see Biden is about to announce we need to wean our dependence off China. So people are just waking up to it, you know.
Wow, that those are some staggering numbers for sure. And to kind of circle back to what you had said before, you mentioned, you know, kind of inflation resistant and different things like that. It sounds like, and you can expand on this, but just based on the need for it globally, that the different factors that, you know, affect like the real estate market and the stock market don't really play into this just because of the truly the demand that is needed for these metals. Is that correct?
You've nailed it, Jonathan. Supply and demand are in charge here. Nothing else. Nothing else.
Okay, that's very fascinating. So I guess talk to me then about what does it look like? So an investor, you know, looks like from your website the minimum investment's $10,000. You know, what does it look like if I'm an investor? I give you $10,000. What's that process kind of look like?
Okay, so we would recommend, we'd have a discussion before, like, you know, do you want to invest in a certain industry? You know, like for example, modern technology, military applications, and we'll educate you a little bit on the metals. You might already know which ones you want, but we definitely would recommend buy 3 or 4, maybe 5 metals, so you're diversified within your purchase, you know. Then how it works is, as I said, I'm a sales partner for Tradium, so you're not buying the metals from me. And let's say you said to me tonight, Louis, I'd like to buy $10,000 worth of technology metals. I would email Tradium tonight, and tomorrow they would send me an offer, which I would forward to you. That offer will have the, you know, how much per kilogram, what the purity levels are, what the case numbers are, what the analysis reports are. So it's also called a pro forma invoice. I don't know if you use that term in America. So you'll get that offer first of all. And once you've reviewed the offer, and if you're happy enough to go ahead, then you say, yeah, I accept the offer. Then Tradium would send you again an order confirmation with a commercial invoice, which would also have the wiring instructions. And then you wire the funds directly to Tradium in Frankfurt, and then they would send you a sort of a paid invoice. Now, normally pre-COVID, it would take about 30 days for your metals to arrive in the vault. But what they do is they lock you in on the price, you know, once you fund. So the price is locked in. And because of COVID, delivery is sort of taken 30 to 60 days, but your invoice will actually say delivery within 90 days. But on average, they're coming in about 60 days. Once your metals then arrive in the vault, you'll receive a what they call a pool, an account credit statement. So just it'll basically show then the metals are there and everything like that. And that's when there's also a storage fee of 2% a year. But, you know, a lot of our clients up to now have been in Europe, and within Europe, like paying your storage fees, there's no bank fees. And because clients in America have to pay a bit more, what we're going to do is US clients only have to pay every 12 months for the storage, you know, and it's 2% a year. And that's it really. And then I would create a sort of just basically a Google sheet, which will show you, you know, the price on the day you purchased. And I'll update that weekly. I get the prices twice a week. So you'll be able to watch every week what each in the price fluctuations and what your average gain is. And look, I'm very happy to say, Jonathan, right, that none of our metals are down in the last 5 years. I mean, you know, that's it's a revolutionary statement, but it's true. So we expect the same positive returns to continue for the next 3 or 5 or 10 years. So it's very, again, supply and demand are in charge.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating. So I guess with all of these, you mentioned that you get the prices weekly. Is there sort of a market that people can watch, or is it just something that, just those in the industry, like the company you work for, get access to the pricing? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, no, that's a great question as well. So look, I wouldn't say it's a closed industry, but the only buyers are industry buyers. So you have to do a little bit of digging if you want to compare prices. So, but I mean, 5 minutes on the internet, you'll be able to, like, there's a website, Asia Metals, which you can see the prices of strategic metals. For North America, most clients go to Kitco. I don't know if you're familiar with Kitco.
I don't think so.
Kitco are in business about 40 years, but they were, I think, the first company to sell precious metals online. To be very, very, amongst people who are into precious metals in North America, they would know who they are. But Kitco published the prices, on a daily, weekly basis. So where else would you find them? Financial Times, look, you're right. They're not like gold where you can find everywhere. You just have to do a little bit of digging. But no, the prices are public and quite easy to find.
That's awesome. So what's that been like now? You guys are reaching out to US customers. Sounds like there's been a market already over here, maybe a little bit more on the low key side. So have you started to see an influx from US and North American investors?
Yeah. Look, I'm European, but and I'll get in trouble for saying this, but North American investors, in my opinion, are more sophisticated investor to Europe. Maybe because, just that innovation in investing and stock markets and stuff. But so the US clients, I find, when they have an ear for it, and when they investigate it properly, a lot of people just tend to go, rare earths, and it sounds risky. And truth of it is, there may be a perception it's risky, but unless you have investigated, how do you know it's risky? People just tend to say it, without thinking. So the people that do their due diligence, though, and in some cases, I mean, I have a client next week who's flying from California to Frankfurt, and I'll tell you, he's going to invest quite a bit. So, I will, happily meet him in Frankfurt and wine and dine him for a few days, but we'll go to the office, we go to the vault. He wants to touch it, see it, feel it. Other clients, I can send them a compliance pack, which they can then have an attorney do due diligence. But those that investigate it love it. Again, it's a very, it's, as I said, it's the same paradigm. It's very, very simple. You buy the metals, you physically own them, keep them, and sell them whenever, liquidate them when, you've made enough of a profit, So yeah, it will, as I said, it's very early days in the US, but I particularly wanted to sort of market it to North America because, I think, I don't know, maybe Americans have been investing a bit longer, or, I think in the US have more of a healthier appetite to newer stuff and alternative stuff as well. Europe might be a bit more conservative and a bit sort of bit of a fear factor, but I don't know, the US clients have more of an appetite for checking things out at the very least. They don't sort of blow things off. They'll go, oh, that sounds interesting, and let me take a look at that, whereas I've found in Europe sometimes they just go, nah, I'm not interested, but they say that without any basis. I mean, as I said, one of the worst principles in the world is contempt prior to investigation, because it can't help but keep you in sort of everlasting ignorance. If you're not willing to investigate something, how can you have contempt for it? But you do get that a lot with new stuff. And that's sort of how we started the conversation. I personally, I have to watch myself, because I can also be sort of, if I don't know something or it sounds a bit, but the lesson I've learned is, especially when I'm sort of defensive about something, is actually take a good look at it.
Absolutely. And just in, the recent years, I think everyone, who is an investor can relate to that, especially relating to, Bitcoin as a prime example. I'm a perfect example, right? I was unsure. And, of course, I had friends talking about it 3-5 years ago. And, listen, you can always invest in hindsight, and we'd all love to be able to go back, but
Yeah,
that's certainly a good outlook to have going forward, because
yeah,
certainly things are changing, technology changing, and when you can
yeah,
invest in those kinds of things, especially as you said, over the next 3, 5, 10 years, there's really a proven, what feels like almost a proven model for how the next 10 years are going to go in terms of switching to more efficient means of energy.
yeah,
I think you can kind of chop this up as more of an alternative investment, and instead of more of like a risky, and I mean, I don't think it feels like we're even in the early adopter stage of this anymore. We're very much in
yeah.
kind of through that. So
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And actually, you might be. I think this term came from the US as well, which is, and it's connected to real estate, which you might be familiar, which is like, if you're trying to sort of read an investment or figure it out, investigate it, you can look at what they call the path of progress, and have a look at the country or the neighborhood or the town, and have a look at what's happened there in the last 5 years or in the last 10 years. And it should be able to give you a good idea of what's likely to happen in the next 5 or 10. And using that sort of analogy, like if you look at the last 5 years of rare earths, um, none of them are down in value. I mean, they're all up in value. And demand is actually higher now, and production is, there's only a certain amount in production. Now, the Chinese actually have said they are going to increase production and export quotas, but that's still not going to match the demand. It's just not going to. I mean, you can, the Fraunhofer Institute in Frankfurt are looking at it, and they said there's just no way. So either way, it's a good time to buy them and own them.
absolutely. Awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. We'll jump into the final 5 questions here as we come to a close. So what's the best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
Keep my mouth shut.
Bit ironic for a salesman, but there is something to that sort of silence when it comes to being in that industry.
Yeah, I think I'm answering it more in a philosophical way, like a life, maybe not a business firm, but it's funny, you might laugh at this, but when I first went to Germany, my first sales manager was a guy called Jack Legg, who was a World War II veteran, and he'd stayed in Europe, and he was sort of, he'd risen high up. It was a US company, but he was the sales director for military cars. So they sold all new American cars to the military in Europe. And he trained us, and he gave us all the Vince Lombardi principles, mental toughness is essential to success, always control the ball, always be 15 minutes early. So if you arrive on time, you're already 15 minutes late. And I'll always remember him because he was very charismatic, dynamic. And I was this Irish kid in Germany, and, we had no foreign investment, or we'd no economic stability. So to leave Ireland, which was, we had 20% unemployment, with bombs going off, was quite depressing, and go over and meet this World War II vet. And he was so open and willing to share what he had learned, So I would say, I think he's passed away now, but yeah, and he was quoting Vince Lombardi. So that's probably my mentor, I suppose.
That's awesome. Cool. So next question, a recent failure or mistake, and what you learned from it.
Always. I mean, I'm always making mistakes, what I've learned is, and this, and I only learned this in the last 10 years, and it was from a mentor as well, which is to do a daily sort of an inventory, like you would a business inventory, except on yourself. And that's where all personal growth will come from. And I apply that in all areas of my life with, my wife and daughters. I try to anyway, and I try to remember. But if you can do an inventory at the end of the day, as if it's a business industry, and you're basically looking at your own assets and liabilities and seeing what could I have done better. And so I suppose the answer, Jonathan, is I always make mistakes, and I continue to, but I look for them, and that gives me more of an awareness, so I'm not making the same ones again and again.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. One thing I took from a mentor I've had is, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. And so, at least for me and my partners and things like that, we celebrate our failures in the sense that, that means we're trying hard, and
Yeah.
as long as you learn from them and keep going, that's the best thing you can do.
Yeah. I think probably in a few years, they'll take the word failure and mistake out of the language, because if you learn from something you've done, I mean, it's been of value, so.
It's true. It's true. It's hard to call it a mistake or a regret if you learn something from it. So, And what's been your favorite book lately or recently that you've read?
Oh, Jesus, these are good questions. I wish you had prepped me for these, Jonathan.
Sorry, that's actually, I guess I should probably do that.
Let me think. Awareness by Anthony DeMello.
Okay. Awesome.
Great book.
Love it.
He was a Jesuit priest who moved to India and became, I wouldn't say, actually, he probably wouldn't say he was a Buddhist or a Jesuit. He became a very spiritual person, and it's a brilliant book. Awareness, yeah.
Okay, awesome. We'll definitely link to that. And then, are you familiar with the Marvel superheroes or?
My daughters are. They're in the next room, but I watched the Eternals with them the other night, so I know some of them.
Okay. Do you have a favorite?
Iron Man, I don't know enough of them, actually. I have to be honest.
That's fair. Okay, cool. And then last thing, what's the best way for people to reach out to you and get a hold of you as it relates to the investment and everything?
Okay, so our website is www.strategicmetalsinvest.com. And my email is Louis, Louis, @strategicmetalsinvest.com. And if anyone gets in touch as a result of our conversation, and if they become a client, I'm sure we can do something special for them as a thank you to you and to your audience.
Awesome. I will absolutely link all that in the show notes as well to make it very easy for everyone to get a hold of you. Louis, I've had an incredible time with you. I wish we could keep talking because you're obviously very knowledgeable and this is very fascinating, but I appreciate you coming on and joining us today.
Thank you, Jonathan. It has been my pleasure, and I hope to come out and see you in Utah at some point.
Absolutely. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Listen, I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. Even though this is technically a daily podcast, you know it's coming out the next day. We have a ton of content coming your way. So please like and subscribe. It helps a ton. Leave comments. Would love to know what you guys think. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.